Kavavamad Bays, 102.
106.
106b, sorry.
Yeah, you're right. There's a machleket where the Pinchas killed him or really someone else, or midrashim. I see the problem with that because being a Kohen, he can't serve.
That's a problem either way because the Torah says he killed Zimri.
Oh, they get around that problem.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's a famous discussion. So either way, however you deal with that.
There's a way to get around the problem.
It's a famous discussion.
He didn't actually kill him, like he brought him to death, and then he may have died before he became a Kohen.
It's a famous discussion. But anyway, we're going to leave it for now. But that's true. Rashi here does say that it wasn't Pinchas himself. It was his people, but because he was the leader, it was on his name.
But certainly he was the one who brought him down. Al-Khalid brought him down through the tzitzis. But
that's not mentioned here, though.
Yeah.
Here it's mentioned he killed him with a specific way, getting all four.
Yeah, no, he may have brought him down, and then they killed him. It's possible, because they were in Shemaim, they bring him down.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's
now we get to doyeg. So the line begins with the word bay, and the second word is ksiv. It's about 11, 12 lines from the top of the page. First word is bay, and the second word is ksiv, and there's a little gimel next to it. Okay, so one of the commoners on the list of the Mishnah, of those who lost their share in the world to come, one of them is Bilam, which we just discussed at length, and one of the others is Doyeg the Edomite, who is responsible for telling King Shaul where David was hiding in that city with priests, and as a result of his tattletale, Lashon Hara, there was basically a massacre where almost I think one Kohen survived. One Kohen, one priest survived that whole town. Shaul killed them all. So this is Doyeg, both betraying the king and betraying the future of Jewish monarchy, and then resulting in all his death.
Do we know his motivation for betraying David?
It seemed I would assume because technically King Shaul was still king, and King Shaul's asking. Actually, no, I don't know if King Shaul asked or if he offered. I don't remember. But presumably that's the reason, because he was giving in to Shaul. Shaul is the king.
So he basically was trying to get into Shaul's good graces.
Yeah.
For better.
I guess he picked the wrong side. He thought Shaul would win.
Yeah.
I guess. But as we're going to see, what made it even more egregious is the level of Doyeg's Torah scholarship and his potential. And because of his great potential, is why he's held to such a high regard. And why it's such an egregious, such a deep betrayal, because of his potential. And that's the opening lines here, which sets the tone for the rest of the discussion about Doyeg. Okay, so Ksiv, the verse reads, Doyeg, in at least one place, probably more, but at least one place, it spells the word Doyeg with an aleph, Daled, Vav, Aleph, Gimel. Ksiv, and elsewhere, at least one other place, it says Doyeg with two yuds. Anyway, it seems like it's not written that way, but rather the pronunciation is that way. Sorry?
Maybe it's with one yud.
Well, at least a yud, but the text says it appears doesn't have that. But it seems there's a kri and a ksiv, which means there's a lot of times in the Torah there is the way the words are written and then the way the words are pronounced. And in some places it's an aleph, and in some places a yud. And the Gemara wants to know why that is. So says the Gemara like this. Amar Bechon says the reason why there's different spellings to his name is because B'tchila, to begin with, Yoshev HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God was sitting v'doyeg and worrying. That's doyeg with an aleph, doeg in modern Hebrew. So he's doeg, God is worried, like considering Shem Yatza Zela Tarbas Ra, maybe this is going to go out. Maybe this one doyeg will end up in a bad place. With all the potential I've invested in this doyeg fellow, he might end up in the wrong way, and that's why it's called doyeg, as in worry. After he's already gone the wrong direction, first with the Lashon Hara, tattletaling on King David to King Saul, and then causing his death. Woe unto this one that we lost him, as it were. And that's why he's with doyeg with a yud, meaning woe. Or there's the vav yud in the middle of the daled vav yud is vei, which is like woe or bemoaning. This in and of itself is unbelievable. This statement. The Gemara says that God's worried about how things are going to turn out. That's what the Gemara describes. It's an amazing thing to think about. It means Hashem invests potential into a specific person. In this case, we're talking about doyeg. And God, as it were, is sitting. That's the Gemara's term, Yoshev. God's sitting back and watching it play out and saying, I hope this works out. It's an amazing, amazing thing.
It's
Doesn't he know how it's going to work out?
No, Hashem knows the future, of course.
He knows the future, but whatever his relationship with us is such that
He's
he's looking at us and concerned, as it were, how we're going to do. I once saw
A father and a son, he wants his...
Yeah, I saw once.
It's free choice.
It's free choice, but it's an amazing thing how Hashem
He's
is.
concerned about it.
He's
Hashem
concerned
knows
about
the
what's his
Yeah.
free choice. He knows what it's going to be, but I mean, he's just like...
He's concerned, like, same with the father. He sees the son going the wrong way. He has free
Yeah.
choice. He feels bad. He wants
To
his
understand
son.
the philosophy,
his way. He's going to let him...
right? But to understand the philosophical reconciliation between this and determinism and free choice is not the subject of this discussion. There's ways to explain that. There's all kinds of discussion. I'm discusses at length, but the point here from this Gemara is that in our relationship with Hashem, it's not as if like you're just trotting along and all is fine. Hashem is like watching abatedly. How are you going to do? I put effort into you. I put investment. I put potential. How are you going to use it? So as a doyeg, as it were. I actually saw once from, I think from the Mittler Rebbe, from the second Chabad Rebbe. It's a famous teaching, which is, the pasuk says, Magid Devar V'Yakov Chukum Mishpat V'Yisrael. God tells his word to Yaakov, to Jacob, Chukav Mishpat V'Yisrael, his statutes and laws to Israel. So, it's a famous teaching that it's Chukav, his teachings. This is in the Medrash, it's a classical work, not a Hasidic teaching. Chukav Mishpatav, his laws, he tells the Jews. Which means, that's what the Medrash concludes, that whatever God commands of his people, he does himself. The classic example is the Tefillin. This is where that statement is made. We learned it in Brachas, isn't it? Or I'm sorry, Menachos.
No, Brachas too.
Brachas as well.
Yeah. And then they go so far. What are the
exactly? The Gemara goes on to even say what is written in Hashem's parshas. Hashem, in our Tefillin we praise Hashem, and in Hashem's Tefillin Hashem praises the Jew. So the Mitzvah asks where and how. You have to be able to find in every mitzvah counterpart that Hashem is doing, right? And it could be in our relation. Our mitzvah is our relationship to Him, and His mitzvah is His relationship to us. Like the model of tefillin. Our tefillin describes our love of Hashem, and in Hashem's tefillin it describes Mikam Chli Yisrael, how great are the Jewish people. God's praising the Jews through His tefillin, as it were. So you have to find the counterpart in this relationship. So when it comes to the mitzvah of loving Hashem, it's easy. Hashem loves us. Okay. What about the fear of Hashem? We have awe and reverence and fear of Hashem. So what's the fear? What's the mitzvah of fear, as it were, that God keeps towards us? God's afraid of us, God forbid. How does this work? So he doesn't cite this Gemara, but it's this idea. Hashem is fearful, as it were. How are we going to turn out? Hashem is fearing, as it were. The Gemara's word here is doyeg, worried. Hashem is like in a fearful state, in quotation marks, as it were. How is the Jew going to turn out? It's an incredible thing. It lends a lot of weight to this idea we talk about, especially the Rabbi talks about it a lot over here, that mitzvahs are not merely for our good, but Hashem Himself is waiting to see how we're going to be doing with it. Hashem Himself is invested, as it were, in our outdoing. And here's an extreme example in doyeg. Hashem puts all His effort, and Hashem is doyeg, worried. How's it going to turn out? And then when it goes the wrong way, He becomes doyeg with a vav yud. Whoa, we lost all His potential. This sets the stage for the rest of the discussion on doyeg. And the Gemara gives him a mnemonic, which is interesting. And I think this is what I just said as explanation. The Gemara puts the mnemonic after it introduces doyeg. First it gives a statement about doyeg, that God was worried. And then once it turned out negative, God said, whoa. And then the Gemara gives a mnemonic about all the verses it's about to quote for doyeg, as opposed to putting the mnemonic before. So it's almost like this is an introductory statement, context, setting the stage, and now we're getting into all the details. So let's see. That's the word mnemonic?
Mnemonic.
Mnemonic, thank you.
Mnemonic. You don't pronounce
you don't pronounce the...
Yeah.
Don't pronounce the M.
Mnemonic. Why that is, I don't know. It's in English. It's one of those
rules.
things.
Anyway, the Gemara just puts a way of remembering the lines that are about to show up. And they are Siman, sign, a mnemonic, Gibor, Rasha, Tzaddik, Chayil, Sefer. So let's see. Amar Bitzak says, what's the meaning of the verse which reads, Matas halal bira. This is a verse in Tillim. Why should one show off, Tasala, praise himself in that which is negative? Hagibor bira hagibor. Why should the strong one show off in his wickedness? Chesed kel kol hayoyim. There's God's kind grace all day long. In other words, you should be focusing your attention on that rather than your strength, which possibly is negative. So the Gemara now, Rabbi is asking what this verse means on a deeper level, and the Gemara is going to apply it to doyeg. Namely, Amalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu LaDoeg. God says to Doeg, Loi giba b'Torah ata? Are you not strong in Torah? Matasal bara. Why would you then go off and behave badly? Aren't you strong in Torah? So the verse reads, Matasal bara hagibar. It's putting a comma after bara and then hagibar. Matasal bara. Why would you show off in negativity? Hagibar, you great one. You great one in Torah with all the potential you have, with all the knowledge you had. Why would you end up going this direction? Loi chesed kel nati alecha kol hayom. And then the rest of the verse where it says chesed kel kol hayom, God's kindness shines all day long. This is God saying to Doeg, is it not the case that you had God's divine grace on you in your Torah study? Not just you had Torah study and knowledge because you were a smart person, but I actually invested in you. You had this, not just the academic knowledge of Torah, but the chesed kel, the divine grace that's embedded in Torah. You had access to all that. And here you went off to Salul Bara to show off in negativity. First statement on Doeg. Another statement. Rabbi says, "My dixiv." What's the meaning of the verse which reads again in Basuk in Tehillim? V'larasha Amar Elakim, and to the wicked one God says. This is the verse in Tehillim, 17. V'larasha Amar, and to the wicked one, V'larasha Amar Elakim, and to the wicked one God says, Malach alasapra chuki. Why would you be talking about my statutes? In other words, you wicked one, why are you learning my Torah? That's the verse. So the Gemara now applies this to Doeg. God speaks to Doeg and says, Doeg the wicked one, and says, why would you be talking about my laws? Why would you be teaching my Torah? When you get to the section of Torah discussing the law of murder, when you get to the section of Torah which discusses the laws of slander, speaking negative of other people, what do you teach there? In other words, these are the sins that you fell for. You slandered King David to King Saul, and then there was murder. And then you go studying my Torah where it says not to do what you did. What do you do there? It's hypocritical. Better you don't. It's almost like God doesn't say this straight in the Gemara, but it seems like God's almost saying, better you don't study my Torah. At least you don't drag my Torah into your place of misbehavior. To a smaller scale, we have to think about our own selves in this context. There's a famous letter from the Rebbe. Someone's writing about worrying about parnasa and this, and worrying about different things that people worry about, and somewhat uncharacteristically, so there's a handwritten note. Never write something like, "With all the chassidus you're learning, what happened to the emunah?" Question mark, question mark, question mark. Like, this is what we're learning for. We're learning for all this. This is everything you're learning is to get you to the point where here you are complaining about this again. So in a way, it's like it's on a smaller scale version of this. Hashem is telling Doeg, you're learning this Gemara, you have Chesed Kel Kolayim, you have the divine grace in this Torah study, so what do you do now? You go off and, and it doesn't just, it's not just a question of you being a hypocrite, but you actually, God's kind of alluding to the fact that it's almost better if you didn't learn Torah. In other words, don't take my Torah into your place of negativity.
You learned in the Tanya, I don't remember the chapter, that's when you're doing a very, you're dragging Hashem into
that's
the dirt.
Iger Satshuva, yeah.
Yeah. It's the same concept.
That's right. You're taking the neshama that Hashem invested in you and dragging it into a place of negativity.
It's even worse because it involves killing of people. Like a
and murder.
Loses his own life. And affect other people. These were tzaddikim. He killed the whole city of Kohanim.
Yeah.
And the slander was, he said that they're rebelling against Shaul, but it's not true. David came with actually a law.
That's right. They didn't know that David was hiding from Shaul.
They asked him,
it's correct.
Where's your food and where are your people? So I'm on a secret mission. I didn't have time to get food. So they thought that he was authorized by Shaul to come there.
They didn't know that he was in rebellion.
And then when they had a kind of trial, the people said, we had no knowledge of this. And Shaul didn't listen to them and Doeg slandered them. So he was really, it was like an unfair trial as well. And
yes, that's to say, like our version of it is on a smaller scale. B'zeir Ampin. It's not the worst scale, but it's
much worse because he affects these killing other people.
Sure.
And also tzaddikim. It's terrible.
Okay. Now this gets to the next pasuk, or the rest of that actual verse. The rest of the verse where God says, and to the wicked one God says, why are you teaching my laws? This we just described as God saying, what do you do when you get to those parts of the Torah that talk about the things that you did, and the parts of the Torah which say not to do what you did? The next line of that verse is, Vatisa b'risiel alepicha, remove my covenant, or raise my covenant off of your mouth. And this is explicitly what we just described, where God's saying, it's better if you didn't study Torah, instead of taking my Torah and dragging it into a place of negativity.
Or also, it only remains in the mouth, like what you call lip service.
That's what the Gemara is about to say. 1 second, let's get there. Amar Rabbi Ami says, Ein Torah shel Doeg. Torah, the Torah of Doeg was nothing other than Elam Safa v'lochutz. Literally translated means from the lips outward, not from the lips inward. Our Torah services should be from the lips. We speak words of Torah, but inward, and that we internalize the message. Whereas his is the reverse. It's from the lips outward. Just the lip service is.
That's exactly
Can add it to Mr. Gottesman's list.
Add to his list. He can make it for bringing. Here's one for him.
Lip service. In other words, your Torah study is only in the lips because you don't behave and live up to that which you are preaching. Practice what you preach is another line. So the pasuk kind of says, better if my Torah wasn't on your lips rather than chitzonius. Absolutely, this is the most extreme version of chitzonius. There are deeper levels, better levels of chitzonius, but this is the extreme level where it's just lip service.
Yeah, even though we normally say Tach Shalishma Bal Ishma, but this can force me to say because he had no intention. He just was looking at lips. There no intention the Torah should influence him eventually.
Yeah. Okay. V'amar Bitzak says we're further analyzing different verses and applying them to Doeg in this similar context. But here it's actually not about Doeg himself, but about those who encounter Doeg. Namely, V'amar Bitzak says, "My diksiv." What's the meaning of the verse which reads? This is a verse in Tehillim again, 52:8. V'yiru tzadikim, and the righteous saw. V'yiro, and they feared. V'alav, but then on him, yischaku, they laughed. So what's this meaning? I think another meaning to this. Okay, let's see what the Gemara says. B'tchila, first yiru, they were afraid of Doeg, seeing his power and strength and his capacity and his closeness to Shaul. But b'sayif, at the end, when they saw the downfall, yischaku, they laughed. It doesn't say what they laughed at. One could read it that they laughed at Doeg himself. It's probably one reading. But maybe another reading is they laughed at their own fear. I don't want to.
Explains that because they saw the Gemul, they could meet at a young age.
Yeah, but
so that he would Rishon Marina.
Yeah. Anyway, that's what the Gemara says. So they first they were afraid of him, and then at the end, when they saw his downfall, they were relieved. They laughed. So okay, so another verse which again applies to the story with David. This time from Doeg. This time it's from Eov 2:15. Amar Bitzchak further says all the statements are from Rabbi Yitzchak, by the way, which is kind of why it flows like that, and which is why the mnemonic at the beginning is all these statements from Rabbi Yitzchak. And this I think is second to last one. My diksiv, what's the meaning of the verse which reads, Chel bala v'kienu. He swallowed a chel is like an army or strength. Chayil, strength he swallowed. V'kienu, and then he vomited it out. He bit from his stomach. And then the pasuk concludes, Yerishenu kel. Then he's inherited by God. So he swallowed strength, spit it out, and then inherited by God. What is this? It explains Yitzchak. Amar David, Lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God speaking to Hashem, and he says, Rebbeinu Shalom, Master of the universe, Yomos Doeg, let Doeg perish for all that he's done to me and to the priests. Yomos Doeg, he should die. Amaloi, so God says to David, Chil Bala. He swallowed strength, which means he has tons of Torah. Let's wait till at least he vomits out his Torah, and then we can punish him. In the meantime, he has Torah within him, and we can't punish him so long as he's got Torah in him. So God then David retorts, from his stomach may God inherit it. In other words, David Melech is saying, okay, you're worried that his Torah is in him and that's why you can't punish him, so take the Torah out of him. You have to wait for him to spit it out. You take it out of him. Purge it from him. End the statement. It doesn't say what happened or what God decided to do, but this is the conversation. I have to put more thought into trying to understand what's going on here, but this is the statement as it stands, and the floor is open to think about it over Shabbos, and maybe Monday we'll think of something. Okay, final statement from Rabbi Yitzchak on this discussion.
He didn't get the world to come, right?
That's right.
Yes, he's one of the people on the list who didn't get to show the world to come. That's correct.
So maybe because you know how we learned before that every Jew has, no matter what, you always have a spark of. So they have to get rid of that last before he,
Yeah.
you know.
So, but it
even
doesn't
as long as he had a little bit of connection.
Hashem couldn't do that.
in his divine soul. They couldn't do it.
That's right.
It's like, that's what David was saying. Let him get rid of all of it.
Yeah, but it doesn't say, David seems to be asking to speed up the process.
Okay.
But it doesn't say if God did that or not. It doesn't say what happened, but it says what David wanted.
Right.
So I don't know.
Right.
There's two more statements from Rabbi Yitzchak, but maybe we'll just do one now. We'll do the other one on Monday. One Rabbi Yitzchak says, "My what's the meaning of the verse which reads?" Pasuk in Tehillim 52:7. Gam kel yitatzcha lanetzach. God too shall uproot you or disconnect you forever. So what's that? Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu David. God says to King David, "Neitzi doeg la'amod asi." Let's invite Doeg into the world to come. God's defending him. It's interesting. Remember we had before a conversation where David's trying to defend his son Shlomo Melech.
Yeah.
And he does so successfully, right? In the end, he does so successfully. Here, we have the reverse. Hashem is trying to defend Doeg, and David is countering. There's something we have to think about it, but I'm just telling you what the Gemara says here. There's a lot of thought required for this. I'm sure there's much discussion. So, Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, David, God says to King David, "Neitzi doeg la'amod asi." Let's bring Doeg into the world to come. Amar lefanav. So, King David says to God, "Gam kel yitatz lanetzach." Quote, this is the verse. God shall uproot him forever. Sorry, I'm not acquiescing to King David, to Doeg entering the world to come. Okay, that's finished. But then the verse goes on, the same verse. What's the meaning of the rest of the verse? The rest of the same verse, which is, so it says, "Indeed, God shall uproot you forever, shall cut you off forever." And that's David saying to Doeg, let's not let him into the world to come. And the rest of the verse reads, "Yechatek v'yisatzech ma'ol v'sheresherecha ma'eretz chaim sela." Cut off, yisatzech means like uprooted from your tent, and then outrooted from the land, from the living land, forever. So it's further stating kind of the simple reading is usually like it's poetic, where the Tehillim is often the same idea being repeated twice. But obviously when we read the Gemara, we always have deeper interpretations. So there's another part of this conversation. God says to King David, let's welcome Doeg in, and David says no, uproot him. But then the verse goes on to say further uprooting. So what's going on here? What's the further uprooting? Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu. God says to King David, "Lem rishmai tebei midrashim mishmei." Okay, so I won't let him into the world to come because you're asking that he shouldn't go to the world to come. Okay, but at least allow his Torah to live on. Let him be quoted in houses of study in future generations. Amar lefanav. So King David says to Hashem, "Yechatek v'yischach ma'il." May be cut out of the tent, meaning even his Torah should not be reviewed in later generations. And then God responds and says, "Lehevele beninin rabbanon." Let his children be scholars one day. So then there comes the rest of the verse, which says, "V'sharshach me'eretz chaim sela." Uproot him from the land forever. Even his children shouldn't be Torah studied. David will not acquiesce to anything. Not him in the world to come, not his Torah living on future, and not his children. It's pretty incredible.
Worse than Korach. At least his sons got right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's pretty.
Completely.
It's amazing. But one thing I can see, though, and one thing that just dawned on me as I'm reading this, is that because the sin is not between man and God, but between man and other man, full atonement can only happen if man forgives.
Yeah.
And that's why Hashem has to consult, as it were, with King David, because
Hashem is willing to forgive, but not
also,
man.
you can't forgive the people who died. They're even to the
which also means
it was also a lie. That's the other thing is if even Doi gave false evidence, Shaul should have enough sense to think it through. But Doi was so persuasive.
Another thing is it also tells you how forgiving Hashem is.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Even someone like Doeg, Hashem is willing to forgive.
Yeah.
Same we had with Rabbi Menavat, who beat Rosh.
Yeah.
Give him a chance in Canaan as well.
Yeah. Very interesting stuff. This is not the first time we have conversations between Hashem and King David about who gets into world to come and who doesn't. There's got to be something deeper going on here. I'm sure there is. The floor is open to think about it.
Negotiation over Sdom, right? Where
Avram's trying to defend Sodom.
Trying to defend, maybe if there's 50 people, 10. But this is the other way around. It's
Much of the same
Hashem
thing.
is saying, how about David this? No. Man is refusing God's offer for clemency.
Yeah. Whereas Moshe Avraham and Moshe are negotiating to try to get sinners clemency. But
God's taking the hard line, and here it's David taking the hard line, and God trying to be more flexible.
It's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, wonderful Shabbos, everybody.